Oba Tsugomi's critically acclaimed and world-famous Death Note. First chapter. Wow, what an amazing first chapter. Now, it is a bit of an information dump, but the way the information is presented is the key to making it flow and feel natural. From the first page, we know the kind of perspective the main characters Light and Ryuk have. They are not happy with the way things are, giving them a reason to wanting to change that. For Ryuk, it's a lack of stimulation. For Light, it's a disgust towards the world around him. Oba not only introduced us to the main characters, we also know their motivations through their thoughts. By the end of the first chapter, Oba sets the environment that the story will take place in, and leaves it on a juicy cliffhanger. I'll be damned if the thought of a Death Note is not intriguing, and we get a glimpse as to what awaits our main characters. Oba sets up the obstacle Light will have to inevitably face due to his arrogance and psychopathic traits, which are on full display when he talks with Ryuk. Oba shows us Light's best traits and biggest flaws all in the same breath. This is masterful writing technique. Not only is there a symbiotic relationship between the two, Light and Ryuk, but both are also cold and emotionless in their way of thinking. This sets a good tone for the rest of the series, that they are simply tools for each other. Continuity. There's only one time Oba contradicts his magic system, but it's pretty forgetful. It doesn't play an important role in the story. All continuity issues in Death Note have to do with logical fallacies, and they take place in the second half of the series. Aside from one, they all have to do with Nier and Mello, interestingly enough. It's my own opinion that Nier, Mello, and Saito were not part of Oba's initial planning of the story. Why do I think this? Well, it's with the existence of these characters that Oba starts to make mistakes. The existence of the Death Note. The main issues in Death Note all come after L is killed by Rem. The first one being how Nier finds out about the existence of the Death Note itself. Since Watari deletes all information before he dies, the only people that know about the existence of the Death Note are the people that have been involved in the Kida case. Light eliminates the Yotsuba group. Nier finds out about the Death Note via an officer that was present when Higuchi died. Either A, Nier interrogates Japanese police members, or B, the information was spread via the police officer, or officers, considering there were multiple officers that weren't part of the Kida case present when Higuchi died. Option A would imply the interrogation of multiple members of the police, making it impossible for Light not to find out, since he is basically in control of the Japanese police, and if anybody was interrogating the Japanese police with a focus on Kida, you can bet Light would hear about it, considering he's in charge of the Kida case and assuming the role of L. If the Japanese police were being questioned about Kida, they would notify the Kida case members, and as a result, Light would hear about it. This is also pretty difficult considering Nier is not a part of the FBI and has no authority, so interrogating Japanese police would be an impossibility. And even if he was part of the FBI, this would only raise more flags, and the chances of Light finding out are sitting at about 100%. Nier would also have to be interrogating with no purpose or reason, considering the Japanese police were told specifically not to intervene in the Kida case. Also, Nier says that he has never made flight plans, so he'd have to interrogate police over the internet. You can start to see how things are starting to become more and more impossible to get information on the existence of the Death Note. You also have to consider that it is not in the interest of the police to reveal the existence of the Death Note to anyone. This reason alone makes option B a lot less possible. Speaking of option B, the spread of information via the police officers and it falling into Nier's lap. This is the more plausible of the two, and it fits Nier's entire character, since all of the critical information Nier gets simply falls into his lap. The issue? Nier himself states that the existence of the Death Note is not public knowledge, but isn't that how Nier would get this information? Considering his existence is not known to the Japanese police, so a police officer cannot seek Nier out and give him this information, and he also can't interrogate any of them. Why am I making such a big deal out of this? Well, it took L an incredibly long time to even get some sort of evidence or proof of Kida's killing method, but Nier and Mello just get this information for free from the start. So we end up with a half-baked reason as to how Nier came across this very important piece of information, and when you look into it, it doesn't really add up. The solution to this problem is rather simple. Instead of deleting the information, have it backed up and sent into a trust fund for L's heir. Nier's mental gymnastics. Nier knows that all of the current Kida case members have seen L's face. He also knows that L was killed shortly after Light got into contact with the Death Note. If Nier suspects Light to be Kida, and if L's name was unknown to anyone, this should imply that Light made the ideal once he recovered the Death Note, or that Light told Rem, the Shinigami that disappeared, to kill L for him. Nier should know, or at least suspect, that Kida can control Shinigami to a certain extent, After Kira helps the Japanese task force by sending Ryuk and a death note to them, he should also come to this conclusion after finding out about the fake rules for Mello. He also accuses Ryuk of lying at the orders of Light. Nier suspects Light to be Kira and knows that he is in possession of at least 2 death notes, but should assume that he is in possession of 3, the third one being Saido's. He also knows about the existence of 2 Shinigami, Ryuk and Saido, and should assume that if there are 3 notebooks, there should also be 3 Shinigami, and that those Shinigami are all tied to their respective notebook. This means that he should assume that Mikami, Misa, and Light all have their own Shinigami with them at all times. Therefore, having them being followed would do nothing, since Shinigami have already proven to be helpful to the human companion many times. This should also be emphasized, since Mello himself was able to control Saido, and Nier should know about this from Mello. Nier never finds out about Saido leaving with the note, and since Kira can control Shinigami, he should assume Kira is not only in control of at least 3 death notes, but also 3 Shinigami, but he never comes to this conclusion, which he should, considering all the evidence pointing towards it. So why am I making such a big deal about this? Because this ties into the way that Nier gets evidence, and the asinine way he leaps to conclusions and ignores incredibly crucial evidence to get a very important piece of information. You're probably wondering what that piece of information is. Well, like I've said before, all the critical information Nier gets falls into his lap. And it happens with this as well. When Mikami speaks to himself, what Mikami says is incredibly important and allows Nier to get the death note relatively easily. So what's the problem? Having someone follow Mikami is a really bad idea, since they can't see the Shinigami that should be with Mikami, and they could also be killed far too easily, as has been proven before with the murder of all 12 FBI agents. Yes, Nier should know about this if he has been investigating the Kira case, along with being in contact with the head of the FBI. So the only way to get past this issue is if Nier finds out that Mikami does not in fact have a Shinigami with him. So how does he get to this very important piece of information? Mikami speaks to himself, out loud, while being recorded, and with knowledge that he's being followed. As I've stated before, most of the critical information Nier attains falls into his lap, which is not okay considering he's supposed to be the smartest person in the verse. So not only does Nier have to ignore tons of crucial evidence to move ahead with following Mikami, he gets the biggest breakthrough because Mikami just decides to talk out loud when he knows he's being followed by an SPK member. This has forced narrative written all over it. Mello the kidnapper. Mello kidnapping Takara makes absolutely no sense. She has time to get into a stranger's bike, but not in the cars that are following it. This entire situation is completely ridiculous. Not only is this scenario completely illogical, but it lets Nier find out about the existence of the real Death Note. Mello kidnapping Takara makes a lot less sense when you realize that Mello has no reason to kidnap her at this time. It could have also worked against Nier, since this could have pushed Light to postpone his meeting with Nier, and that would have ruined Nier's plan, which Mello learned of from Hal Lidner. He makes this move without a purpose and with no reason. Can anyone answer what Mello's reasoning for kidnapping Takara is? No, you can't. I read this series at least 10 times over while doing research for this video, and I can't come across any single panel or proof of Mello's reasoning for doing this. I mean, even Nier doesn't know why he did it. Nier also doesn't believe Mello has the foresight to think of a fake notebook, considering Nier only came to that assumption himself as a result of Mello and Mikami's actions, and wouldn't have arrived to that conclusion on his own either. So the action that makes Nier think of the existence of a fake Death Note is potentially detrimental to Nier. It has no reason for happening, and the scenario that it presents is illogical. Also, Takara supposedly guarded better than the president of the US, but smoke bombs though. Forging God's work. Giovanni reproducing an entire notebook from scratch under 24 hours is by far the biggest ass pull Oba did in the series. Not only is replicating a notebook in under 24 hours extremely difficult to do, but the Death Note is made of things that aren't found in the human world. This was established early in the series multiple times, making Giovanni's task legitimately impossible. If Giovanni cannot create an exact replica of the notebook, Mikami would easily notice. In the last chapter, Oba attempts to cover this flaw by having Matsura come up with a theory that Nier used the notebook on Mikami, which is the reason why Mikami didn't notice the Death Note was a fake. However, if you have the Shinigami eyes, you can't be affected by the Death Note. Brain farts. Light can have Saido kill Mello in exchange for his notebook, and no one on the task force would be against it, considering Mello killed Light's father, and they all also want Mello dead. Saido is also the easiest Shinigami to control, along with there being no rules against Saido killing Mello. This is the reason why I don't think Saido was in Oba's original planning of the story. Light had his Death Note for around a decade. That means Saito was missing it that entire time. No matter how stupid Saito is, that's a bit too much considering that's why Shinigami exists in the first place. There's also a rule that states that a Shinigami must own at least one Death Note at all times. Ryuk also states something that implies that the Death Note Light has really does belong to Ryuk. Mello should also assume that Saito is now with the Japanese task force and should give this information to Nier, but he never does. That's a pretty big piece of information that could get both of you killed, since they both suspect L of being Kira. Plot and pacing. The plot itself and implementation are incredibly unique and very well executed. Oba, in my opinion, has his best moments when he has Light masterfully navigate some very intense situations that are all tied to the progression of his plot. To me, there's really only two story arcs, Light versus L, and Light versus Nier and Mello. In my opinion, Light really did bite off more than he could chew going up against L. He was outwitted multiple times by L, and the entire time Light had a huge advantage over L. Yet L found genius ways to get information and stay a couple steps ahead, even in scenarios where he clearly had a lot less information than Light. When we look at Light versus Nier and Mello, however, it's almost the opposite. Nier and Mello get access to a ton of information. The first arc is beautifully crafted with multiple moments of brilliance on both Light and L's behalf. I really did find myself rooting for both and didn't get the feeling that Light won through any forced narrative. When I read the second arc, however, that's the only feeling I get from it. The forced narrative that Light gets outdone by Nier. It feels like someone wanted Light to lose, but instead of finding a genius way to outsmart Light, they just forced a scenario of the bad guy losing. Pacing has to be by far the strongest aspect of Death Note. Every single chapter pushes the plot forward. Every chapter has some sort of valuable piece of information. There was never a point where I thought that a chapter could have been left out without hurting the story. My hat goes off to Oba for that. That takes some serious skill. This extremely good pacing is the reason why you're always on the edge of your seat when reading the series. I was incredibly impressed by Oba's writing skill in this area and his skills in general. Other mangaka should be taking notes. Character depth and analysis. The hero we need, not the one we deserve. Light has clear strengths and weaknesses. He's very ideal when it comes to what you want in the main character. He's very flawed but always strives towards his goal, no matter the obstacles. He has aspects that the audience should very obviously dislike, but his intentions are and were always good. Some people might say that Light became drunk or corrupt with power, but I'd have to disagree. At no point did Light ever use the Death Note for any selfish gain. He always used it for the purpose of ridding the world of disgusting people. Light's determination is a virtue that should be admired. How many of us can truly say we would stop at nothing to make the world a better place? How many of us can be that truly selfless? Yet it is that virtue itself that will not allow Light to accept failure, leading Light to kill people that are not inherently evil, they just happen to be in his way, and as such must die for the greater good. This conflict of morality is truly great writing by Oba, and what is interesting is that Light only feels conflicted for a very short period of time. Light's psychopathic traits were evident from the very first chapter, and his manipulation of people, specifically women, is also great proof of this. This is his flaw. Like most serial killers and psychopaths, Light wants the world to know of his existence. Just like most psychopaths, Light is also arrogant, always believing the smartest in the room is more a hindrance than a benefit, even if you are correct. This leads him into thinking he can take on L. This is also a big reason why, in my opinion, L is Light's intellectual superior, surrounded by idiots. The smartest person in the verse isn't Nier, Mello, or Light. It's easily L. The huge disadvantage that L had at the beginning of the story, yet zeroed in on Light anyway, was by far the biggest display of intellect in the entire story. He had suspected both Kiras and was able to imprison them while not having any information of the Death Note and Shinigami. He had enough evidence to back up his suspicions. He had both Kiras cornered with only two options, either one, confess, or two, give up ownership. In a way, forcing both Kiras to concede their powers is a victory within itself. The most impressive thing out of all of this is that L did this with no knowledge of the Death Note and its rules like both Nier and Mello had, on top of not having a Shinigami helping him like Mello did. The most unfortunate thing about L was that he was limited by the idiots around him. As the saying goes, you know faster than the slowest member of the group, and as Light had to clean up after Misa, L had to carry the entire Japanese task force, while also being at an inherent informational disadvantage, unlike Light, who had access to both sides of the case. Light's victory over L was not done by outsmarting L, it was done by outsmarting a Shinigami, who although very powerful, aren't very smart creatures. In fact, L was a move away from declaring checkmate if Rem had not killed him. Spoon-feeding spoiled children. As you've probably guessed by now, I'm not a big Nier fan. As I've stated before in my introduction video, if a character is supposed to be smart, stupid, funny, I want to see them play the part. I want to see them committing those actions. Nier never really shows his supposed genius. The information he has is all handed to him by other people. He does not attain it through outwitting anyone. He does not arrive at any information through intellectual feat. He learns of the Death Note's existence from a cop. I've already stated the multiple problems with that. His next breakthrough is gaining information about the Death Note and its fake rules courtesy of Mello. The other breakthrough he has is because Aizawa gives him all the information regarding the Kita case. He didn't even set the scenario up. Mello did. Mello handed him Mogi, but that wasn't the important part. Mello set up a scenario where Nier could talk to all of the Kita case members. Mello set up the T-ball and Nier was simply up to bat. His final and last breakthrough is when Mello kidnaps Takara. I don't think I need to harp any further. Nier's character is best described as a spoiled child that was spoon-fed all of his accomplishments. Final thoughts. I might be stepping out of line, but I think Jump probably asked Oba to have Light lose in the end. Maybe Jump was afraid of the message it would send if a psychopathic mass murderer like Light was the victor and made the world a better place. It would also be promoting the idea of dictatorship at a certain level. I think that is why Light lost in the end. This of course is just my speculation. Overall, Oba is a very skilled writer, and I was consistently impressed by him, and Death Note is easily one of my favorites of all time. I'll be working on Veritas and Berserk the Golden Age movies, so please look forward to those videos. That's just it for me. Thank you for watching. Later.